pissed because I recorded this already and it wasn't recording, and my son called me an old lady for having those technical difficulties. And we are back. Welcome back to All That Erica. I am Erica, for those of you who are new here. Thank you so much for deciding to click on this video to see and hear all my feelings about all the books that I read in the month of March. And to my returning friends, again, as always, thank you for deciding to check back in on me and continuing to hold me accountable with the creation of these videos, as well as reading the books that I say I'm going to read. In today's video, we are going to talk about all the books that I read for the second half of March, because I did talk about a few books that I read during the first half of March. So this video will be dedicated towards my stats. I will talk a little bit about the books that I did read for the second half, and then finally we will wrap it up with just a few small goals that I have for myself. I didn't talk about them in my April TBR, but I will put them in this video. But in the future, moving forward, I will be sure to include some reading goals along with the books that I have on my TBR for that month. And let's jump right into stats. All right, so stats wise, I did read 20 books this month, which is great for me. I think February, I read 21 books, so wow, one book off. I believe I read 21 books in February. I could be lying. I'll put it here. I read that many books in February. So I'm excited. I'm happy with 20 books. I think that's a great number. I'm trying to read as much as I can before I start my PhD program in the fall. And I guess a little spoiler alert, but I did receive some funding to allow me to study for free. So I will be doing my PhD full-time now instead of part-time. So I'm pretty sure I will not have as much time to read books that I had initially planned. So we're going to try to knock out as many books as we can before this is set to start in August. But I did read 6,962 pages this month, which averages out to be 224 and a half pages a day. I did read a lot of audiobooks this month, or listened to a lot of audiobooks this month, and I tend to listen to them at 2.1 speed or 2.25, whatever it is. So I tend to get through books pretty quickly because of the audio speed. So that makes sense for me to have that such a high average. The total amount of money that I spent on books this month was $47.98. So right under that $48 mark, which is fine for me. I think this first quarter, there really weren't a lot of books that I was like interested in putting on my shelves. I was more so interested in checking them out from the library. So I'm sure this number will increase because I believe the summer months is when I have a lot of pre-orders that are coming through. So we will see that number gradually increase as the months of the year go on. And my average rating for all of the 20 books was 3.47. And I think, that just sums up that March was just a meh month for me. I think most of the books that I read were just, I don't know, they were just okay. Like nothing, a few books knocked me off my socks, but then the others were just like, okay, glad I read it, on to the next one. Next up, we have stats that I personally track. So first up are authors of color, and those are authors who do not identify as white. And I read a total of 16 books from authors of color, which is good. I really love to read diversely. Maybe I'll start tracking like their ethnicities if anyone is interested in that. But I usually tend to read from Black women. I usually tend to read from Black women, but I would love to continue to diversify what I mean by authors of color and continue to read from more authors of color. As for library books, I had 6 physical library books that I completed, 1 NetGalley read, 10 audiobooks, and then 7 of the 20 books, or 7 of the 19 books that I read were from books from my shelves, which is amazing. I'm trying to, I'm trying to whittle down this physical TBR and read more of the books that are, collecting dust on my shelves. And the amount that I saved from shopping my library was $185.07. Cha-ching, I guess. That was a great reading month. And in that calculation, I include audiobooks as well as like the physical books that I check out, but I don't include any audiobooks or books that of course came from Scribd or Audible in that calculation. And also I know there's a flaw in my calculations. I tend to take the amount that the book is on Amazon the day that I finish it, and we know those prices fluctuate. So moving forward, I think I'm just going to use the suggested retail price for the books to have kind of like a more whole number, and something that probably won't be able or won't fluctuate depending on what day of the month you are looking at that book on Amazon. All right, so I also use StoryGraph. So these are StoryGraph stats. Now I did read 20 books, but StoryGraph doesn't count DNFs, and I did in fact DNF one book this month. So the numbers for this are going to be a little bit different than my own like personal tracking. All right, so first up we have reading format, and 10 of the books or 53% of the books were audiobooks, and 47% or 9 of my physical books were, or 9 of my books were physical books, obviously. So yeah, I love that for me. I want to keep it as close as I can between the two. I'm sure this is going to increase probably in audiobooks, or the stats or this chart will look completely different later on in the year when I probably switch more towards audiobooks versus physical books. Next up, page number or page count. 7 of my physical books that I read were between 300 and 499 pages. And 2 out of the physical books that I read were less than 300 pages. Now, I know I have mentioned on this channel before that I do not like books that are over like 350 pages. And I'm shocked that I have this many books in that page range. Again, it could be books that were 350 and less, but I do know 1 or maybe 2 of the books that I read this month were above 400 pages. So I don't know who I am. Who is she? Like, girl, these numbers, I don't know. All right, moving on to fiction and nonfiction. 89% of the books that I read, or 16, were fiction books, and 11% were nonfiction, or 2 total books. Yeah, I don't like that skew. I love nonfiction books. So I really want to try to increase or change that breakdown to get it closer to maybe 75-25 or even 60-40. Just depending on my mood and like what nonfiction books do I want to read for the month. But overall, I mean, that's okay for the percentage. I think I read a lot of nonfiction books in February, so I probably just was like, let me just take a little break here. But hopefully next month that will be closer to a 75-25 split, or even a 60-40. I would love that. For ratings, my average ratings was 3.34 stars. So it was close to my own personal stats, but again, like I mentioned, StoryGraph doesn't count the DNF, and I did in fact DNF Masters of Poison. I think it's Masters of Poison or Master of Poison. I don't know. I'll put it here. I did DNF this book earlier this month. All right, as for genres, the top genre for the month was YA, and I read a total of 9, and then with fantasy coming in second with 7. I am completely shocked by that. Again, I'm being called out with my lies. I told you all I am not a fantasy girl, and somehow fantasy was number 2 in the most genres that I read in the month of March. So I don't know, maybe I'm becoming a fantasy girl. What's my sis Heidi say? Maybe I'm the trade of the season or whatever. I'll put it here. I love her. But let me clutch my pearls, girl. Am I becoming a fantasy girl? Or maybe was that just a fluke for the month of March? But that is it for the stats. So we are going to move on to our book reviews. And so for the book reviews, like I had mentioned, I've already wrapped up some books in my March wrap up, so we will only talk about the books that I read for the second half of March. If you're interested in my thoughts on those previous books, definitely check out my March wrap up to hear my thoughts about the first 9/10 books that I read for the first half of March. All right, so the way that I'm going to split these up or the way that I'm going to split these reviews up are by disappointments, shockers, and loves. So anything that is a disappointment was something that I rated from 2.75 stars and below. Shockers will be 3 to 4 stars, and then loves is 4.25 and above. I hope my math makes sense. I don't know, girl. Or maybe that's 4 and above. Girl, I don't know. 405, 401 and above. Whatever will be a love. All right, so let's jump into it. Our first disappointment was Carolina Built by Kiana Alexander, and I gave this 2.5 stars. And this was just a historical fiction about real estate magnate Josephine Leary, and it just chronicled her life like post-emancipation in North Carolina. And that was, you know, the greatness right there in that synopsis. That was all for me, because sadly this fell short. I think it was a dramatization of Josephine's life, and I just didn't enjoy it. I think this book would have been better off if it was a nonfiction book versus historical fiction. So yeah, I'm pretty bummed about that one, because that was a highly anticipated book for this year and it just didn't work for me. Next, I actually have this one, was Gallant by V.E. Schwab, and this I think was a YA thriller, if I'm correct, or YA fantasy. And I fell for the hype, y'all. I fell for this beautiful cover. I fell for the synopsis of, you know, ghosts and like a haunted house. I fell for, or, you know, I experienced some FOMO. I saw everyone put this on their anticipated reads list, and I totally ignored, you know, that bad first date that I had with V.E. Schwab, and I think it's Eddie LaRue. I hated that book. No, hate's a very strong word. I did not like that book. So I don't know why I thought I was gonna like this one any better. But sadly, you know, Olivia, who was our main character, and her ghost and her eccentric and quirky family, I don't know, it didn't work for me. I didn't enjoy it. Sadly, I will have to return this one to Target, because I just am not going to keep this on my shelves, because I didn't have a great time reading it. Yeah, and if I had to say one great thing, was the writing was beautiful. The illustrations in here is very pretty, but that's not enough for me that's not enough justification for me to keep something on my shelves. So hopefully this can go into the hands of someone else who really enjoyed this story. But I don't know if I mentioned, but I did give this one 2.5 stars. Then our final disappointment was The Quarter Storm by Veronica C, or is it Veronica G? I don't know, by Veronica Henry. I gave this one 2.5 stars, and this is book number 1 in the Mambo Reina series. Again, this was a highly anticipated read just because of the synopsis. So it talks about, there's a mystery in this book. It talks about voodoo, magic. It takes place in New Orleans. Like, it has all the things that I want to read in a story. But sadly, it just didn't work for me. And again, I hyped myself up thinking, you know, giving this writer a second chance, thinking that the first, you know, experience that we had together when I read Bacchanal earlier this year, I figured, you know, maybe I would enjoy this one because it was like a different type of genre, different type of atmosphere. And sadly, I don't know, it just fell short. Let's see, we are following Mambo Reina Dumond, and she's a Haitian American voodoo priestess, and she gets involved in like this mystery when a ritual slaying occurs, and she takes it upon herself to take up the case, I guess is the best way to say it, because of the police department and just them not taking it seriously. And I don't know, like, that sounded amazing, right? All of that sounded good, but sadly it just didn't work. Like, we learned that our Haitian priestess had like some water magic capabilities, but then that was it. Like, we don't really learn what that means. So that, and then it just, I don't know, it just didn't work. I wasn't connecting with the story. I just like really kind of dragged my way through it, or like it was like a slog. Like it took me forever to get through it. It didn't work for me. Again, this is a series. I don't know if I want to read book 2 because I'm like, oh, maybe they will talk more about her powers in the second book, or I could be let down again. So I don't know when book number 2 comes out, and maybe I will try to reread that one again before the second one comes out, and maybe I'll have a better experience the second time around. But for now, that one just didn't work for me, and that wraps up our disappointments. All right, on to our shockers. I have 4 books. First up being Dial A for Aunties, by Jessie Q. Sutano, and I gave this one 3 stars. This was just okay. Like, I think I hyped, again, you know, it seems like the problem is me. I hyped myself up and I didn't understand the synopsis, or maybe I overlooked the synopsis. I thought this was a mystery and we had to figure out like who put this body at this wedding that our main character, Medellin, I forget how to say their name, at this wedding that they're working at. But, you know, we find out early on that no, that's not the case. Medellin is the murderer. Not intentional, but an accidental murder takes place with someone that she went on a date with, and then she enlists the help of her aunties and her mom to help, you know, hide the body. It was very, is that Weekend at Burn, or that movie? Is that movie called Weekend at Bernie's? I think, where they're like dragging around the body. If I'm correct, I will put it here. But it gave me that, like, you know, they're dragging this body around to place, like putting him in a free or in like a little storage thing to drag him. Like, some of the parts was very funny, and then other parts of the book I just was like, I don't know if we need that. Like, the romance just didn't seem real to me, and I don't usually read a lot of romance, so if something to me doesn't work as like casual romance reader, I'm pretty sure everyone else who, or, you know, those diehard romance readers, it probably didn't work for them as well. Book number 2 did recently come out for this one, and I don't know if I'm going to continue with this series or not. Maybe that will just be something I add to like on my radar shelf, and if I'm in like a delay in books or something like that, or a slog or slump, maybe I'll pick that one up. Next was This Loving Kingdom by Tahira Mafi, and this was a fantasy. I think this is book number 1 in a trilogy. This one, you know, Persian mythology, jinn, ancient, like Middle Eastern cultures, all the things that I really enjoy and I love. And this was a fantasy, so, you know, I'm not a fantasy girl, but I like when fantasies have this type of concoction or mixture. And I don't know, this one was just okay. You know, it has some romance in it, and we're following our main character, Eliza, and she's a servant, but she's also a long lost queen to this ruling empire. And so her and then someone else in the story, their 2 empires are like clashing. So we're following her as she is moving through her servitude, almost similar to like Cinderella themes, with like an Arab background, I guess, or Arab mythology around it. Yeah, I don't know, it just was okay. I wanted more about jinn. Like, we do learn a little bit about it, but I think I was just like itching for, ooh, give me more about jinn and how they tie into the story. I will say I do want to continue on with this series because the ending had me stuck. Like, I was like, hold up. Pause, what just happened? So the ending did make up for it, so I'm excited to, no, let me not even say, the ending did make up for this, so I am interested and curious to continue with this series, just to see, you know, what happens, and maybe we'll talk more about jinn in the next book. Then we have The Paradox Hotel by Rob Hart, and I gave this one 3.5 stars, and I really enjoyed this one. I would have rated this a lot higher if the ending wasn't the way that it was, and I'm guessing I am an ending girl. If the ending isn't great, then I am going to knock you down a notch when I give you my ratings. But this one, because it was a mixture of sci-fi, fantasy, it had like historical elements to it, and yeah, I just really enjoyed this one. I did talk about this in my first reading vlog, so you can definitely check that one out for my full thoughts and like a full review. But overall, I did enjoy this. It only landed in the shocker because of the ending. Like I said, it just didn't work for me. But if you do love sci-fi and time travel, I would definitely check this one out. Then we have The Intangible by C.J. Washington, and I gave this one also 3.5 stars. I really went into this one not knowing a lot. Like, I knew we were following a pregnant woman who had some pregnancy complications, and like she was seeking out help from an expert. And that's all I knew, right? So that woman that we were following is Amanda Jackson, and she has it all. You know, she has a husband, a home, a great job, a car, everything, right? But she doesn't have a baby. So of course they get pregnant, and sadly she does miscarry, but her body still thinks that she is pregnant, and there's a term for it. I'll put it here. But so she seeks out the help of Patrick, I believe was his name. Yeah, Patrick Davis, who is a neuroscientist, and he tends to, or he did specialize in a few things like when your mind is tricking your body or playing tricks on your body. So she sought him out. They formed this like really cute friendship, and then some additional things happen along the way. I can't really, expand upon it because they will be spoilers, but they form this beautiful friendship where, both of them are struggling in their own relationships, and I guess that kind of helps them to bond. But yeah, this one takes like some twists and some turns, and like we meet and follow their respective partners, and some things happen. Like, it gets better, right? So the only reason this one landed in the shocker for me is because I believe C.J. Washington is a data scientist as well. So we got a lot. Oh, and Amanda is a data scientist. So a lot of the things in there were like very jargon or science heavy and data jargon heavy. And usually I don't have an issue with that in books, but I don't know, it seemed like to me it just messed up the pacing of the story, because I found myself at times like skimming past some things. So if it didn't have those things in it, I think this probably would have been like a 4.5 or even a 5. But overall, I really enjoyed the book. I had a great time reading it, and I look forward to reading more from C.J. Washington. All right, so that, I believe, yes, that wraps up our shockers categories. So let's move on to loves. For this one, I only have 2 books. The first one being Unmasked: My Life Solving America's Cold Cases by Paul Holes. I did do a dedicated vlog for this one, so you can definitely check that one out to get like my real raw reactions and thoughts about this. But overall, I gave this 5 stars. And if you love true crime, if you love solving mysteries on your own or trying to solve mysteries on your own, I definitely, or I would highly suggest you check this one out. This one is set to come out later this month. So give it a read, a listen, however you consume your books, and definitely check out Paul's podcast if you like true crime podcasts. And then my final love was Coming of Age in Mississippi, the classic autobiography of growing up poor and Black in the rural South by Anne Moody. And I gave this one 5 stars, and this was amazing. I think I mentioned I really enjoy nonfiction books about African Americans and their experience. But I usually don't read autobiographies from that time period, or I usually don't read autobiographies from like the Jim Crow era, or during like the time frame that I tend to really lean on and really love, like post-segregation in the South. And Anne like did that for me. Way that this was written, in the way that Anne spoke, like it felt like I was talking to an auntie or talking to my gran, and like just having a conversation about her life. And I just love that the editors didn't try to change this to reflect or change this to be American English, and that right off the bat was amazing for me. Second, I loved her passion. Like, Anne grew up poor. At times, all they had was bread and beans to eat. And I think that really helped shape who she was as a social activist. Like, we follow Anne. She does attend the March on Washington, and then she helps register people in the South to vote. What else does she do? Oh, we also get like a firsthand account of when the 4 girls were bombed in the church in Birmingham, I believe it is. And we get her firsthand account, like a real raw reaction and anger to like the leaders of the social justice movement or the nonviolent movement with Dr. King, and how she was very angry with them that they were taking that stance of nonviolence and not doing as much as she wanted them to do. I think, she felt like, hey, I'm here in the trenches. Anger was validated. It was valid because she was in the trenches trying to get these people to vote, like seeing firsthand how being poor and the changes that were happening in America and weren't like including poor folks, just how those impacted her communities and how like the nonviolent leaders just weren't, responding or reacting to that. So that was like such a great thing to read. Excuse me, this was such a great book to read. I cannot wait to purchase this. I will probably have to look high and low for this book in my local bookstores, or maybe in a thrift store. There is an alternate cover to this. I'll put it here. That's the cover I want, so I may have to do some digging to find it. If not, I will get this cover. But this is definitely a plus. I cannot wait to continue to read this in the years to come. But overall, I loved this story. All right, so that wraps up our book reviews. So very quickly, I just want to talk about some goals that I want to achieve in the month of April with my reading. First being, I definitely want to read 2 books from my physical TBR. Like I mentioned, I do track books that are on my shelves. So I'm trying to reduce that as much as possible. These right here are pretty much like my priority reads. I did read Mirror Girl, so I guess I am 1 out of my 2, batting 50%. But these are the priority reads that I have of books that I want to finish, at least get them off of like my physical TBR to see if I have to unhaul them or not. I do want to read 1 book from my backlist TBR, so I do keep track of books that I see across Goodreads or that I see people talking about on Book Talk and Bookstagram, all those places. And I keep track of them and I try to add them in as I can to my TBR for the month. So I do want to read 1 book from there. And then I want to read 4 nonfiction books this month. I have 2, I believe 2 that I'm anticipating are coming out this month. So I hope to get to those. And I don't know the other 2 that I will get to. But yeah, let's see if I can get 4 in this month or not. And then finally, 50% of the books that I read have to be in physical form. My physical book and my audio books as close to 50-50 as I can until I start that PhD program in the fall. So we will see if I'm able to achieve, that 50% of physical books that I read for the month of April. And then finally, there are 2 additional things that I do want to track. I want to start tracking how long things are on my physical TBR. I think just seeing that number will probably put like a little fire under my butt and get me to reading those books. But then also, I don't know, maybe it's just a good thing to see like how long or how quickly I'm able to get to books that I put on my overall TBR. And then there was something else I wanted to track. I forget what the other thing, I'll put it here. There was another thing that I wanted to track. I'll take a screenshot of it in my personal tracker and put it here because my mind is blanking, but I do want to start tracking that. We will see what that looks like moving forward in my next wrap up for April. But that is it for today's video. March was just an okay month. It was meh, and that's totally fine. Not every book is going to knock me off my socks every time. And I think as long as I'm enjoying or having a good time reading the book, those shockers may be what I'm really most excited about getting to or most excited about reviewing, because it's a book that I went into not knowing a lot about, or a book that I probably didn't have high expectations for, and then bam, it shocked me. So that's it for today's video. I hope you all have a great day, evening, weekend, whenever you are watching this. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I would love to have a conversation about the books that you read in the month of March, and maybe I will continue to add things to my TBR, and just seeing what other folks are reading. And I will catch you all in another video. Peace.